Retirement planning is often portrayed as a complex, daunting task, and for good reason. As best-selling author Morgan Housel has observed, there are many overnight tragedies that can derail even the most carefully crafted retirement strategy. But the flip side is that the true path to financial security is paved with long-term miracles, the slow, steady compounding of good decisions over time. So in this video, I'll show you how to avoid a few of the most common overnight disasters. It turns out the biggest risks actually have nothing to do with outside economic forces, what's going on in the economy or the market or who gets elected next. The biggest risk is actually something that no one is talking about today. I'll also show you a real-life example of a financial plan we drafted 18 years ago and how it stacks up today, just to show you the powerful effect of a pile of conservative best guesses stacked on top of each other. Let's start first with the handful of small torpedoes, little nukes that sow the seeds of overnight disasters. Now, I said what the biggest risks are not. While external forces certainly can cause risk to your savings, to see the biggest risks, we actually have to look inside ourselves. Because your retirement plan's greatest risks are actually leverage, overconfidence, ego, and impatience. Behaviors that investors and pre-retirees regularly use to blow themselves up. Now, at first, leverage. Leverage is an especially dangerous one, especially when it comes to your retirement nest egg. Now, without a question, some of your biggest purchases in your life will be necessitated on the smart use of debt. Your college tuition, your home, perhaps vehicles from time to time. But misuse can also be the express lane to financial ruin. Why? It's just simple math. Leverage amplifies both your gains and your losses. And when you're talking about your life savings, those losses can be catastrophic. Maintaining a life with no debt means the number of volatile life events that you can stand throughout your life is extremely high. When you introduce debt into your life, the range of what you can endure, it shrinks. So as your debt increases, you narrow the range of outcomes that you can actually endure. And if you don't think life will throw you these curveballs, give thought to what are the odds that at some point in the next 40 years, you'll face war, recession, terror attacks, pandemics, poor political decisions, health crises, career transitions, family emergencies. What are the odds that any of these things will happen? 100%. So having too much debt in light of the volatility of life increases your probability that your plan will fail. By the way, if we haven't ever met, I'm Steve Willems. I'm a wealth advisor with a Willems Wealth Planning Group out here in BC. We started this channel to help you plan for your own retirement, helping you think about how to arrange your investments, your income streams, and ideally have you pay less tax along the way. Now, the second source of plan failure is overconfidence. After saving aggressively for decades, it's easy to start feeling like a financial guru, like you've seen it all, you've mastered the game, cracked the code. Unfortunately, the research is pretty clear on this one. Folks who think they've figured out investing, asset management, they tend to make some of the most boneheaded decisions. They trade too much, they take way too much risk, and they completely ignore the warning signs that could derail their carefully laid plans. And history is littered with examples of costly overconfidence. Picture Elizabeth Holmes is described as the poster child for the perils of entrepreneurial overconfidence, or the founders of BlackBerry for being so narrowly focused that they missed the competition, or the sinking of the Titanic, a ship that was marketed as unsinkable. On the one hand, you've got what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with a low ability tend to overestimate their competence. But we also see this with people who know their stuff, falling victim to overconfidence, where they massively overestimate even their own abilities. So they end up making rookie mistakes, not diversifying properly, ignoring potential risks, or just failing to seek external advice. The antidote to this is a degree of humility. Strong opinions, loosely held, validated by someone from the outside. Now, while overconfidence is more of an inflated assessment of one's abilities, ego is about an inflated sense of self-importance. And this can also derail your retirement plans. Any amount of intelligence one has can be easily overridden by ego. Ego often prevents people from seeking help or admitting that they even have knowledge gaps. It makes them less likely to seek that help or thoroughly research their options, believing that they can handle it on their own. Ego can also blow up effective estate planning. Studies show that about 70% of wealth transfer plans fail, and it's often due to the ego or the hubris of the individuals involved. Now, everyone knows that impatience is basically a sin, right up there with greed and envy. In our fast world where instant gratification can't come fast enough, where 2-day prime shipping is just too slow, the concept of getting rich slowly has been put to the test. Morgan Housel, that author I referred to, he says it this way: the fastest way to get rich is slow. Impatience in our finances often takes the form of either undersaving, so some jam today comes at the expense of a whole jar of jam tomorrow, or overborrowing, where we're pulling forward tomorrow's spending to today. It's this paradox where you think big, you think long-term, but you also do the small daily thing to make incremental progress. This takes the form of people making suboptimal choices, like withdrawing their retirement funds prematurely, maybe taking on more risk to juice their returns, overtrading or realizing investments too early, maybe maintaining a lower than required savings rate. Ultimately, it's the trade-off of short-term gratification over the building up of long-term financial security. Properly setting expectations is really key here, as is coming up with a way to gamify the small, incremental steps of progress towards that long-term vision. So if these are the 4 personal biases that are the root cause of retirement plans failing, what does the flip side look like? What kind of long-term miracles can we look forward to just by showing up and doing the right thing day after day? Here's just one example we pulled from the filing cabinet to illustrate this. Let's hop into our Back to the Future time machine and let's meet John and Jane. The year is 2006, right before the great financial crisis. John at the time is 44 and Jane is 43, and they were planning for their retirement. John was an incorporated professional. He had a holding company. They owned a home. They had about $431,000 in RSP savings, and they had recently bought into the office building through which he operated his professional practice. The total net worth at the time for this family was about $1.1 million. Now, they had goals to retire partially at the age of 55 and then fully retire at the age of 60. So back in 2006, these were the actual diagrams from their plan. When we modeled it out for them, this is what their chart actually looked like. It mostly worked. They'd be going into retirement with about $2.4 million of total assets, but they would be forced to downsize their home in their early 90s to fund the shortfall at that time, which didn't seem too unreasonable. Under the hood of this plan was a pile of best guesses about inflation, rates of return, professional earnings over his career, home values, lifestyle spending, costs of the kids' education, the economy, all of that stuff. Now, where possible, these guesses, these assumptions are conservative and based on some form of evidence. When building these plans, we want to always plan like pessimists. We want to assume the worst. And in this client's case, it was a reasonable assumption. Since just 2 years after we made this plan, the US market entered what's come to be known as the Great Financial Crisis, the GFC, with the market pulling back 55% from the high. Up here in Canada, we didn't escape that fate, and the TSX retreated 48% over that time period. Now, of course, at that time, the past decline they were experiencing felt like a massive risk to their carefully laid plans. But that's just the thing. When we look back at it now, every past decline looks like an opportunity, but every current decline feels like a risk. Now, John and Jane, they kept following the plan. They steered clear from those 4 trappings of retirement plan failure. They maintained their savings rate, they controlled their behaviors, they stayed invested, and while at the low, they found themselves 25% off of where their plan thought they would be, they were able to make up that last ground incredibly quickly, ultimately staying ahead of those plan projections even as they were benchmarked up every 4 years thereafter. So while that original 2006 plan couldn't have been timed any worse, right before one of the worst market crashes in a generation, it still worked. And not only did it just work, it worked out incredibly. That 2006 plan had projected a total net worth of $2.4 million by this point in the plan, now with them in full retirement. Now, where are they at today? An aggregate net worth of $4.5 million, with every single line on their balance sheet beyond those conservative assumptions from 18 years ago, which just gives them even more flexibility to increase their retirement spending beyond what they thought was possible when they had envisioned their retirement 18 years earlier. We've tracked this journey with them every single year, and every 4 years or so we rebase their plan with fresh assumptions, which is why the gold line here, the projected plan line, occasionally jumps up to reflect the current reality at that time. At the end of the day, for John and Jane, their successive small decisions, they had a really big impact. With our team kind of walking alongside them over this 18-year period, they were able to compound their total net wealth, not just their investments, their total net wealth at about an 8% compound annual growth rate. So as you think about your own situation, consider what small adjustments might be able to produce a significant difference when you compound them over a long enough period of time. And for sure, beware of those 4 key behavioral traps many people find themselves caught up in as they navigate this journey. Hey, I hope that was helpful. If it was, hit that like button and be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any future videos. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.